John, let's review UFC 162, a shocker. It was a good card up until the main event, but the main event just stole the show and for all the wrong reasons. Looking back on it, John, was Anderson Silva's heart in it, or was it apparent that he wasn't?
I think that afterwards, I think a lot of people are drawing conclusions based on the fact that, Anderson Silva went to, a game plan that has worked for him in the past where, he just gets into guys' heads. And I wasn't as critical of Anderson Silva's style on Saturday night because not only has it worked in the past, it was working in the first round where Weidman took him down, was winning that round, and then suddenly when Silva got up and started beginning clowning with him, that's when you really saw Weidman start to get frustrated. You heard him in his corner yelling to his cornerman about Silva. It was effective in the first round, and you kind of lived by the sword, and in the second round he died by it. But it was a surreal finish to this title reign for Anderson Silva, but one that I think people looking here at this rematch could be gigantic.
When and if that rematch ever happens now, because the whole thing has been sort of put on indefinite hold because Anderson Silva said afterwards he wasn't retiring. He's still got 10 fights left on his contract, but he's talking about his family, his students, his country. Then he wanted to thank the U.S. and all this for doing what is done for him. But he's also got some other things on the table. Specifically, he's got a movie he's about to start doing either this week or next week. So this thing is really a conundrum.
Yeah, I think that with Anderson Silva, kind of the rule of thumb in fighting is you never take a guy right after a big loss with any kind of grain of salt, because he's coming off of that loss. I think he's going to go home. As you mentioned, he does have some movies lined up and stuff, but I think when he sits down, he's going to realize, listen, I've got this contract here where I get paid X amount on the back end for every time someone orders a pay-per-view for one of my fights. And a rematch with Chris Weidman is probably going to do about 1 million buys. And I don't care if you're a multi-millionaire. I don't care how much money you have. It's really tough to turn down that kind of opportunity. And I definitely foresee this rematch happening, and I think it would be gigantic. So Anderson Silva, I do sense that when this was over, there certainly did feel like this weight was lifted off of his shoulders, which is an incredible one. I mean, there's been a focus on this guy since he won that title in 2006, and I'm sure that he's kind of relieved that, for once, I can relax. I am not the target here in the middleweight division, and I can relax here without having this enormous pressure that he has had on himself.
The pressure that he's had on himself being the champion for so long is it's good. The pressure that he's going to have, and certainly in the short term, is all the criticism. Now, I'm not sure whether he's going to, he's going to see it, read about it, hear about it. He's got management, but and he's going to be involved, as I said now, with a movie. But it's a different type of pressure that he's going to be dealing with. And it's one thing to lose. It's another thing to lose in the way that he did, in which people are very critical. A lot of people thought he threw the fight. It was mentioned frequently on social media. Dana White was asked about it by one of the reporters, and he said, basically, are you effing crazy? So, I mean, you know what? This is going to be one of these controversial fights that people are going to be talking about it for a long time. And when he does start to fight again, that's all they're going to be asking him about.
Yeah, I mean, it's natural, I think, for some people that are watching to just draw that conclusion based on his post-fight interview and such. But it's just, to me, it's too far of a stretch to believe that this guy, threw a fight here, taking a shot like he did from Chris Weidman. I mean, as we've seen, this has worked for Anderson Silva in the past, and I can't even say that it was the worst idea. Obviously, putting your hands down, gigantic mistake here with Chris Weidman. But you also look at, as we talked about last week, Perry, what was the best way for Anderson to win this fight? And it was striking with Chris Weidman, avoiding Weidman's wrestling and staying up. And Weidman immediately shot for that takedown in the first round, nearly got a heel hook on Silva, which if Silva was looking for an out, that was it. Gets back to his feet, and then suddenly it starts just playing around. And Weidman, you didn't see him go for any more takedowns. It was almost like he was drawn into this, come on, strike, and kept him on his feet for the remainder of that first round. So I think that it was Anderson Silva that just got it was a calculated risk, and that's why you call it a calculated risk. I mean, it burned him in the end, and it was almost kind of poetic justice for this guy who has won so many fights doing this kind of thing, and then ultimately succumbing to it.
How many times have you seen him do it to that extent? Because we've seen it against, well, certainly in his last 2 fights he did it. I don't recall him doing it with such consistency, with such animation that he did it in that fight.
It's not like you see it in every fight, but we saw it with Damian Maia, where the first 3 rounds was a lot of that, where he was just toying with Damian Maia, a guy who was not comfortable striking with him at all, and kind of just kept Damian standing as a result of that, and then just pretty much ran away from him for the final 2 rounds. It was a horrid fight. I don't encourage anyone to go back and watch that one. We saw a little bit of it with Forrest Griffin, which was a very, very quick fight back in 2009. And then, of course, most recently with Stephan Bonner, where he was just, I think he knew right away that Stephan Bonner was beyond out of his depth here, standing with Anderson, and Anderson just played with him and made him look a fool by the end of it.